The road to the dark side is often paved with the best intentions, and Master Atris serves as the perfect parable. She was a Jedi historian, a scholar of the Order's most sacred traditions and a guardian of knowledge. She believed in the Jedi Code with unwavering devotion, seeing herself as a guide in a galaxy where the Jedi had become compromised by politics and emotion. It was this conviction, this belief in the absolute necessity of Jedi purity, that would ultimately lead to her downfall. In the silent halls of the Jedi archives, Atris found her true calling. As a historian of the Order, she possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of the Jedi's failures and triumphs throughout the ages. Her analytical mind allowed her to connect distant events in time, seeing patterns where others perceived only coincidences. This ability made her a respected yet inflexible voice within the Jedi Order. From her earliest days as a historian, Atris developed a rigorous perspective on what it meant to be a true Jedi. Her immersion in the Order's chronicles granted her a deep understanding of the dangers lurking for those who strayed from the path. Stories of fallen Jedi were not mere warnings to her, but irrefutable proof of the need for strict adherence to the code. Atris's mindset was significantly shaped by her studies of the great schisms that had torn the Order apart throughout its history. The Great Sith War of 3996, before Battle of Yavin, was a conflict that shook the foundations of the Jedi Order and the Republic, exposing not only the ferocity of the enemies of the light, but also the internal flaws in Jedi teachings. Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma, former Jedi Knights, were the architects of destruction, their names etched in history as traitors who had abandoned the path of light to embrace darkness. But for Atris, the true tragedy lay not in their fall, but in how their masters had allowed it to happen. The conflict had begun like so many others, with a thirst for knowledge that turned into arrogance. Exar Kun, an exceptionally talented Jedi, became obsessed with the ancient Sith secrets, convinced he could understand their power without succumbing to it. His master, blinded by his brilliance, gave him the freedom to explore, believing his will was unbreakable. But the truth was different. Kun ventured down the path of the dark side, guided by the echoes of an extinct but never truly dead civilization. Such was Exar Kun's pride that he succumbed and became the Dark Lord of the Sith. Ulic Qel-Droma, on the other hand, was consumed by an illusion of heroism and vengeance. He did not seek forbidden knowledge, but believed he could destroy the Sith from within, infiltrating their ranks and defeating them with his own cunning. His master, Arca-Jeth, did not stop him, believing in his apprentice's strength. But the dark side was not an enemy that could be challenged with impunity. Ulic, in his arrogance, underestimated its power and fell. The war, unleashed by the betrayal of these two Jedi, brought the Republic and the Jedi Order to the brink of collapse. In the chaos, countless Jedi, including luminaries like the ancient Master Odan-Ur, fell at the hands of these two fallen Jedi. Atris saw in all this the definitive proof that the Jedi Order had failed. The laxity with which Padawans were trained, the lack of discipline, and the permissiveness that allowed them to explore their own will had opened the door to catastrophe. Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma were not just isolated cases. They were symptoms of a fragile doctrine that had allowed its own seeds to turn against it. Atris, as a Jedi historian, immersed herself in the records of the past, searching for answers. She found disturbing parallels with even older events. The first great Jedi schism, which occurred millennia earlier in 24,000 before Battle of Yavin. Xendor and Arden Lyn, two Jedi who had rebelled against the Order, had done so because they believed the traditional teachings stifled the true potential of the Force. Their forbidden relationship, based on an emotional connection the Jedi considered dangerous, was the catalyst for their fall. Atris saw in this an evident lesson. Emotions, when allowed without restraint, inevitably led to ruin. Thus, she began advocating for a radical change in the Order's structure. She argued that the Jedi must return to a stricter version of the Code, similar to that defended by Oda-Nur, the ancient master who had preached the need for absolute detachment, love, passion, the desire for power, or even simple unchecked curiosity were dangers a Jedi could not afford. Her analysis led her to a clear conclusion. The Jedi Order had failed these individuals by not instilling sufficiently rigorous discipline and by permitting practices that weakened their resistance to temptation. Atris intensified her efforts to reform what she saw as a broken learning system. Her arguments became sharper and more urgent. How could Jedi like Kun and Keldroma not fall when the Order allowed such liberal practices as training dozens of Padawans under a single master? How could the Jedi maintain their purity when training was permitted to begin in adolescence, when minds were already tainted by worldly attachments and desires? Her proposals found roots in the teachings of Master Simikarti, who centuries earlier had written the Teian Apologia, a series of texts penned at the Teian Praxium that addressed how the Jedi Order could best serve the Republic. He argued that Jedi should only be trained from childhood, believing that once a being reached maturity, they could not fully deny their negative emotions or prevent the external world from shaping their minds. To Atris, this principle was an undeniable truth. Atris' vision of the ideal relationship between masters and Padawans was clear and restrictive. A master should devote themselves entirely to one apprentice at a time, forging a deep yet disciplined instructional bond. This connection should never be confused with personal affection or emotional attachment. The master's purpose was to guide, instruct, and when necessary, correct, always with an eye on the code and never on personal feelings toward the student. The interpretation of the Jedi Code admitted no ambiguities or personal adaptations, according to Atris. The code was absolute, and an infallible guide to be followed to the letter. Her preference for the interpretation proposed by Master Oda-Nur was no accident. Oda-Nur, the wise master murdered by Exar Kun at the Jedi Academy on Ossus, had refined the code to its purest and strictest essence. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. This version, more inflexible than previous interpretations, resonated deeply with the historian's vision. To her, Oda-Nur's version was not merely a rephrasing of the code, but its logical culmination. The absolute prohibition of emotions and passions represented the only true barrier against the seduction of the dark side. Atris' arguments, backed by her vast historical knowledge and presented with a relentless logic, found support among influential figures in the Order. Her passionate defense of a return to stricter principles and her homage to Oda-Nur's memory resonated at a time when the Jedi were desperately seeking to avoid another catastrophe like the one they had just suffered. In recognition of her wisdom and dedication, Atris was appointed a member of the Jedi High Council. From this position of authority, she continued advocating for her reforms, determined to strengthen the Order against future threats. To Atris, ideological purity was not merely a personal preference, but the only safeguard against the dark side, which constantly lurked, waiting to exploit any weakness in the Jedi's spiritual armor. Atris' rise to the Jedi Council could not have occurred at a more turbulent time. The galaxy stood on the brink of a conflict that would change the course of history, the Mandalorian Wars. The Mandalorians, under the leadership of Mandalore the Ultimate, had begun a campaign of conquest that threatened the Galactic Republic. Their aggressive tactics and warrior mentality allowed them to quickly dominate several systems in the Outer Rim. The Republic, desperate, requested aid from the Jedi Order, but the Council, including Atris, opted for caution. The Jedi High Council believed there was a greater hidden threat, something that justified their apparent inaction as the Mandalorians advanced. This stance caused divisions within the Order. Revan, a charismatic Jedi Knight, openly challenged the Council's decision. He argued that the Jedi could not remain observers while millions suffered under Mandalorian conquest. His passionate speeches and strong presence in the Force attracted many Jedi to his cause, forming the movement known as the Revanchists. To Atris, the rise of the Revanchists represented a direct threat to the fundamental principles of the Jedi Order. She saw in Revan not a savior many hailed him as, but a dangerous dissident whose impulsiveness and willingness to defy the collective wisdom of the Council could lead to disastrous consequences, another Exar Kun or another Xendor. The ideological clash between Atris and Revan reflected a broader debate within the Order. Should the Jedi be passive guardians of peace or active defenders of justice? Atris considered Revan and his followers to be swept up by dangerous emotions like anger and fear, and emotions that would inevitably lead to the dark side. Her opposition to Revan was not personal, but a reflection of her conviction that the Jedi Council, with its collective wisdom, always took the correct path. Despite the Council's objections, Revan and his followers, including his loyal friend Malak and the notable Mitra Surik, departed to join the Republic in its fight against the Mandalorians. Under Revan's brilliant military leadership, the tide of the war began to turn. The Revanchists proved to be formidable strategists, leading the Republic from victory to victory. The Mandalorian Wars culminated in the devastating Battle of Malachor V, where Revan faced and defeated Mandalore the Ultimate in single combat. It was Mitra Surik who, following Revan's orders, activated the Mass Shadow Generator, a terrible weapon that destroyed much of the Mandalorian and Republic fleets, as well as the planet's surface. The conflict ended with the surrender of the remaining Mandalorian forces, but the cost had been immense. After the victory, Revan and Malak, instead of returning triumphantly, ventured into the unknown regions, supposedly pursuing the Mandalorian remnants. When they finally returned, the galaxy did not recognize the heroes who had once departed. They had fallen to the dark side and returned as Darth Revan and Darth Malak, Sith Lords commanding a powerful fleet. For Atris, this transformation confirmed her worst fears. The fall of Revan and Malak validated her position that intervention in the war had been a catastrophic mistake. However, her perception was limited by her own perspective. Atris never came to understand the true reasons behind Revan and Malak's fall, nor did she learn of their encounter with the Sith Emperor on the world of Dromund Kaas. She only saw the result: two former Jedi corrupted by power and ambition, exactly as she had predicted. The Jedi Civil War that followed was even more devastating than the previous conflict. Revan, using the knowledge and tactics he had perfected during the Mandalorian Wars, launched a calculated assault against the Republic and the Jedi Order. His intimate knowledge of both institutions provided him with significant strategic advantages. Eventually, a betrayal by Malak left Revan severely wounded and captured by the Jedi, who erased his memory and reprogrammed him to serve the Republic. This reconstructed Revan played a crucial role in defeating Malak and ending the war. In 3956 before Battle of Yavin, as the galaxy attempted to recover from the ravages of the Jedi Civil War, Atris participated in a special council convened to judge Mitra Surik, who had returned to face the consequences of her actions during the war. Unlike Revan and Malak, Surik had renounced the Force after Malachor V, becoming a wound in the Force, a phenomenon that baffled and alarmed the Council. During this trial, Atris's ideological inflexibility manifested with particular intensity. While some council members, like Master Atris, saw in Zurich an opportunity to understand why so many Jedi fell to the dark side, Atris advocated for severe punishment. To her, Zurich represented all the Jedi who had abandoned the Order to follow rebellion, and she believed showing clemency could be interpreted as weakness. Ultimately, the council decided to exile Zurich, a decision Atris considered far too lenient. During the dark years that followed, Atris became increasingly reclusive and obsessed with preserving the Jedi legacy. She began accumulating Jedi artifacts and Sith holocrons. Her initial intention was to study these objects to better understand the enemy, but ironically, prolonged exposure to the Sith holocrons began to corrupt her mind. Atris's dedication to the Jedi Order gradually transformed into arrogance and fanaticism. Her desire to protect Jedi ideals paradoxically led her to cross lines she would never have considered before. The historian, who had once fervently defended the purity of the Jedi Code, was now willing to use Sith knowledge for her own ends, justifying her actions as necessary for the Order's survival. In the cold, restored facilities of the ancient academy on Telos, Atris had created a sanctuary isolated from the rest of the galaxy. This complex, hidden in the planet's polar regions, served as a refuge for what she considered the last pure remnants of Jedi knowledge. Unlike the Order's traditional academies, this place was not designed to train new Jedi. In fact, although Atris proclaimed she was rebuilding the Order, she made no effort to recruit Force sensitives for training. Ironic, considering that during her time on the Council, she had fervently advocated for limiting the number of Padawans a Master could take. Even more ironic was the fact that she herself had never taken an apprentice under her tutelage. The Jedi Master had surrounded her sanctuary with a very particular staff. Echani warriors, known for their exceptional combat skills and their ability to resist the influence of the Force. The Echani belonged to a culture that valued hand-to-hand combat as a form of communication and expression, as intimate as any conversation. They believed that through combat, a person's true nature was revealed. These warriors served as Atris's personal bodyguards and protectors of the Jedi and Sith artifacts she had accumulated. Their natural resistance to the Force made them particularly valuable to Atris, who increasingly distrusted everyone. As Atris isolated herself in her academy, the galaxy faced dark times. After Revan's departure into the unknown regions following the Jedi Civil War, a grim period known as the Jedi Purge began. The surviving members of the Order, already decimated by previous conflicts, became prey. What made this purge unique was that it was not a frontal assault like in earlier conflicts, but a methodical and stealthy hunt. 3 very distinct enemies pursued the Jedi during this period. The first was Darth Nihilus, a Dark Lord whose existence transcended the limits of the physical, more a wound in the Force than a living being. His hunger for the Force was insatiable, leading him to consume the life essence of entire planets. The second was Darth Sion, known as the Lord of Pain, a warrior whose body was literally fragmented, held together solely by the power of the dark side and his own hatred. His ability to withstand mortal injuries made him an almost impossible enemy to defeat. And finally, there was their master, Darth Traya, formerly known as Kreia, an ex-Jedi whose philosophy transcended the traditional dichotomy between light and dark. Each represented a distinct aspect of the dark side: hunger, pain, and betrayal. As the Jedi disappeared one by one, fear spread among the survivors. Atris, knowing the location of masters like Zeskayel, Vruk Lamar, Kavar, and Lonavash, chose not to contact them. In fact, these masters were unaware she was still alive. Her isolation was complete. In 3952 before Battle of Yavin, Concerned by the growing threat and the weakening of the Order, Atris made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. She secretly summoned approximately 100 surviving Jedi to a conclave on the planet Qatar, a colony of the Miraluka, a species that saw through the Force rather than with physical eyes. Publicly, the purpose of the conclave was to discuss the future of the Jedi Order in these desperate times. However, Atris's true intentions were far darker. The Jedi Master had deliberately used her fellow Jedi as bait. She leaked information about the conclave, hoping the mysterious enemies hunting the Jedi would reveal themselves, allowing them to finally confront the threat. It was a risky plan, but Atris, in her arrogance, believed it was the only way to save what remained of the Order. What Atris did not understand was the true nature of Darth Nihilus' power. When the information reached him, the Dark Lord saw a unique opportunity, a feast of Force sensibles concentrated in one place. Nihilus arrived on Qatar before the conclave could begin, and using a unique variation of Force strain, he absorbed all the life energy of the planet. In an instant, every living being on Qatar perished, the Miraluka, the gathered Jedi, all forms of life. Only one survivor remained, Visas Mar, a Miraluka whom Nihilus preserved to become his apprentice and herald. The horror of Qatar resonated through the Force, like a silent scream of countless lives extinguished simultaneously. The few Jedi who had not attended the conclave felt the disturbance, an echo of death, confirming their worst fears. The Jedi Order, as it had existed for millennia, was on the brink of extinction. For Atris, the consequences of Qatar were devastating, though she kept her involvement secret. Her plan had failed in the most catastrophic way possible. Instead of exposing the Jedi's enemies, she had facilitated one of the greatest tragedies in the Order's history. The guilt, however, did not lead her to humility or to reconsider her methods. On the contrary, it reinforced her determination to preserve what she considered the true essence of the Jedi, no matter the cost. The continued exposure to Sith holocrons began to affect Atris more and more. Her mind, already overwhelmed by guilt, became more susceptible to the dark teachings. She convinced herself that she studied these artifacts to better understand the enemy, but the reality was that the holocrons were studying her, finding cracks in her conviction and exploiting her fears and resentments. While the galaxy still suffered the ravages of the Jedi Purge and the few surviving members of the Order remained hidden, a forgotten figure returned from the Outer Rim, Mitra Surik, known simply as the Exile. After wandering the farthest corners of known space, Surik had returned. The Force, which had abandoned her after the horrors of Malachor V, seemed to be gradually returning to her, like a distant echo growing louder with each passing day. Her return was hardly triumphant. A series of fortuitous events led her aboard the Republic freighter Harbinger, where she was found unconscious. What should have been a simple journey to Republic space turned into a chain of unsettling events. The events that followed were confusing even for Surik. She awoke in the mining facility on Paragus, with no clear memory of how she had gotten there and stripped of her possessions. By her side was Kreia, a mysterious old woman who presented herself as a Jedi, though her presence in the Force was strangely opaque. The situation on Paragus was chaotic. The mining droids had begun attacking humans, and almost the entire crew was dead. As Surik and her new companions, Kreia and a smuggler named Atonrand, tried to understand what had happened, they discovered that Darth Sion had arrived at the station aboard the Harbinger, specifically seeking the Exile. Their escape became a desperate race through the mining tunnels and station corridors, with Sion hot on their heels, invulnerable to conventional attacks thanks to his mastery of the dark side. The only available means of escape was an ancient freighter, the Ebon Hawk, mysteriously present at the station. This ship, which had belonged to the legendary Revan during the Jedi Civil War, would become Zurich's itinerant home. The escape from Paragus was chaotic and destructive. During the flight, the Harbinger's shots, now under Sion's control, struck the station's volatile fuel depots. The resulting explosion not only completely destroyed the mining colony, but also turned the Paragus asteroid into a field of debris, eliminating a crucial fuel source for the Republic in that sector. The Ebon Hawk could only reach one nearby destination, Telos 4, a world undergoing restoration after its devastation during the Jedi Civil War. Arrival at Citadel Station, the main orbital facility around Telos, did not bring the relief they had hoped for. The Telos Security Force authorities placed Zurich and her companions under arrest, suspecting their involvement in Paragus's destruction. The situation was complicated by the fact that Telos depended on Paragus's fuel for its restoration project. While confined on Citadel Station, Zurich tried to rebuild her connection to the Force and understand why the Sith were pursuing her so relentlessly. Then the unexpected happened. Someone stole the Ebon Hawk from the station's hangars. This act was not a simple theft of a ship. The Ebon Hawk was not only their only means of transport, but also contained T-3M4, an astromech droid that had accompanied Revan and now served Zurich, holding vital information. The theft had not been the work of common thieves. On the orders of Master Atris, one of her handmaidens, named Brianna, had been sent to capture the ship and the droid. Atris's motivation was not mere curiosity. Upon knowing of the arrival of the exile and her alleged involvement in Paragus's destruction, Atris wanted to uncover the truth. The consequences of losing Paragus would be devastating for Telos' restoration project. With the help of the Telos Security Force and following the clues of the theft, Zurich managed to track the ship to the planet's polar plateau, an uninhabitable area where signals mysteriously disappeared. It was there, hidden in the planet's ancient aqueducts, that Atris had established her academy. The exile, along with her companions, commandeered an abandoned transport from a military complex on the surface and headed toward the pole. Zurich found the entrance to a hidden facility. Infiltrating the complex, she discovered it was not a simple refuge, but a complete Jedi academy. The immaculate white walls contrasted with the silent figures of the Ekani warriors patrolling the halls. These handmaidens, trained specifically to resist the powers of the Force, surrounded and protected their mistress. The meeting between Zurich and Atris was marked by years of resentment and distorted perceptions. The encounter was charged with tension from the start. Atris had not expected to see Mitra again after the day of her sentencing and exile. The coldness in her gaze revealed a deeply rooted resentment that time had not mitigated. Her initial accusations about the destruction of the Paragus mining facility reflected her predisposition to blame the exile for any calamity. The conversation quickly turned into an exchange of recriminations about the past. The former council member reproached the exile for following Revan into the war against the Mandalorians, for betraying the Order's teachings, and for acting impulsively without reflection. Every word from Atris was imbued with a personal bitterness that went beyond mere official disapproval. Atris revealed that she had kept the lightsaber Mitra had plunged into the central stone of the Jedi Temple on the day of her expulsion. She maintained it as a reminder of the exile's arrogance, but the intensity with which she spoke of it suggested an unsettling obsession. The course of the conversation changed drastically when the topic of the Sith arose. The revelation by Mitra that the Dark Lords had returned and were hunting the last Jedi, specifically targeting Zurich, believing her to be the last Jedi, visibly shook Atris. Her wounded pride immediately manifested as she insisted that she, not Mitra, was the last true Jedi, as the exile had betrayed the Order and its fundamental principles. Despite her initial hostility, the Sith threat forced Atris to reconsider her stance. Reluctantly, she agreed to return the Ebon Hawk to Mitra and allow her and her companions to leave. More surprisingly, she accepted the exile's offer of help in confronting the Sith, instructing her to gather other surviving Jedi Masters on Dantooine to form a new council that would determine how to proceed against this dark threat. What Zurich did not know was that her encounter with Atris had left another unexpected mark. Brianna, the last handmaiden, had received secret orders from Atris to infiltrate the Ebon Hawk and monitor Zurich's activities, confirming whether she truly still served the light side of the Force. Thus, with a new companion whose true loyalties remained hidden, Zurich departed for the worlds where the Masters were hiding, seeking answers about her exile and a way to stop the Sith who threatened to extinguish the already weakened Jedi Order. Moreover, Atris had been examining the small droid Mitra had brought as a companion, T3M4. Convinced that it contained valuable information about the exile and possibly the Sith, she subjected the droid to exhaustive analysis. What Atris did not anticipate was T3's cunning. While she attempted to extract data from its memory, the droid managed to infiltrate the Academy's systems and access Atris's private archives. T3 downloaded crucial information, a holographic recording of Mitra's trial, and more importantly, a list of the surviving Jedi Masters Atris had located. This revelation directly contradicted her claim of being the last Jedi, exposing a calculated lie. When T3 returned to Mitra, this data would prove invaluable for her mission to gather the scattered Masters. In the solitude of her academy after the exile's departure, Atris began to show alarming signs of her decline into the dark side. Every night, she descended to the depths of the base to study the Sith holocrons she had collected over the years. She justified to herself that this study was necessary to understand and defeat the enemy, but with each interaction, the tempting whispers of these dark artifacts took firmer hold of her mind. Thus, while Mitra traveled the galaxy gathering the scattered Jedi Masters, thanks to the information stolen by T3, Atris remained in her icy fortress, slowly consumed by the darkness she had sworn to fight, inadvertently becoming what she had most feared. The exile's journey took her through worlds fragmented by war, Dantooine, with its scorched plains and distrustful settlers, Nar Shaddaa, a labyrinth teeming with criminals and despair, Onderon, trapped in a civil war, and Korriban, a Sith cemetery inhabited only by specters and broken ambitions. On each world, Mitra found pieces of the puzzle, reuniting the Masters who had once judged and condemned her to exile: Vruk Lemar, Kavar, and Zeskayel. Meanwhile, in the silent chambers of the Telos Academy, Atris contemplated the Sith holocrons she had collected over the years. She firmly believed that to combat the Sith, she must understand their teachings, their darkest secrets, a noble but dangerous reasoning, for the whispers of the holocrons were like distilled poison, slowly seeping into her mind, feeding her bitterness. The return of the Masters to Dantooine marked a crucial moment, gathered in the ruins of the ancient Jedi Enclave. But before they could act, Kreia intervened. The old woman, Mitra's mentor during her journey, then revealed her true nature: Darth Traya, the Lady of Betrayal. With power born from the wounds in the Force, Kreia ended the three Masters, leaving them as empty husks. After the massacre on Dantooine, Kreia left Mitra unconscious and later traveled to Telos IV, to Atris' sanctuary. The encounter between the two women would resonate in the Force like an echo of past and future betrayals. Kreia did not come as an enemy, but as a mirror, revealing to Atris the truth she refused to accept. Atris clung to titles: Jedi Master, Historian, the last of the Jedi, but Kreia with precision tore away these veils of self-deception. She showed her that she too had fallen, bathing in Sith knowledge, betrayed by her heart as Kreia herself had been. For there must always be a Darth Traya, someone who carried the knowledge of betrayal, someone who had been betrayed and would betray in turn. It was not battle that brought Atris down, just as it had not been battle that caused Kreia's fall. It was Malachor V, that graveyard of ships and souls whose echo continued to reverberate across the galaxy years later. Atris had betrayed Mitra, but more importantly, she had betrayed herself. And now, stripped of her illusions by Kreia's words, all that remained was to await the exile's return, though it would already be too late to save either of them. As Kreia left the academy to head to Malachor V, she left behind a transformed Atris, broken, who finally embraced her new identity as the second Darth Traya, the Queen of Betrayal. The Sith Holocrons, which had whispered to her subconscious for years, now roared in her mind, unleashing all their dark power. Fate, however, had another card to play. An Onderonian colonel named Tobin, manipulated by Kreia, informed Darth Nihilus of the presence of Jedi on Telos. The Dark Lord, hungry for the life force of the Jedi, directed his flagship toward the planet, threatening to devour all life on it. As the battle for Telos raged in the planet's orbit, Mitra Surik, recovered after the events on Dantooine, returned to the Academy in search of answers. What she found was her companion Brianna, the last of Atris's handmaidens, defeated and tortured by the fallen Jedi Master. Atris's corruption was now undeniable. The confrontation between Mitra and Atris was inevitable. The meditation chamber, illuminated by the sinister glow of the Sith holocrons, became their battleground. Atris, armed with the forbidden knowledge of the Sith and her own hatred cultivated over the years, attacked with ferocity. But Mitra, strengthened by her travels and reconnected to the Force, proved superior. The lightsaber duel ended with Atris defeated on her knees, begging Mitra to end her life. But the exile, who had walked her own path of redemption, refused to deliver the final blow. Instead of vengeance, Mitra offered understanding. She showed Atris that both had been victims of their own decisions, of their attachment to ideals that had led them away from the true nature of the Force. With words born of her own experience in exile, Mitra made Atris see the madness into which she had fallen. Defeated not only physically, but spiritually, Atris revealed to Mitra Kreia's final plan, to return to Malachor V to create a wound in the Force so great it would silence its echo across the galaxy, effectively killing the Force itself. She warned that Kreia was willing to sacrifice herself at the heart of that graveyard world, a sacrifice that, due to her connection with Mitra, would also drag the exile to her death. As Mitra departed for the final confrontation on Malachor, Atris remained in her academy, surrounded by the Sith holocrons that now whispered threats instead of promises. She had requested to be judged eventually by the new Jedi Council Mitra was forming with her disciples. Her fate now lay in the hands of those who followed the path of the very Jedi she had condemned years before. Atris remained in her meditation chamber, surrounded by the Sith holocrons that had whispered to her ambition and dragged her into darkness. Her mind, once sharp with conviction, now drowned in uncertainty. She looked around, feeling the weight of her mistake. The teachings of Malachor, their existence tormented her. They were not mere forgotten knowledge or relics of the Sith. They were open wounds in the Force, echoes of a massacre impossible to erase. The final battle of Malachor V had not only shattered the planet, but marked the galaxy with an indelible scar. But then, a truth insinuated itself among the whispers of the holocrons. Malachor was not just a mausoleum of ancient power. It was a trap. It called to the broken, the desperate, the fallen. She had believed she controlled the dark knowledge, but now she understood it had always been the other way around. Trapped in the echo of her own arrogance, Atris faced the only certainty left to her. The teachings of Malachor existed not to preserve history, but to lure those destined to repeat it. In the end, Atris became the very warning she had once preached. Her pursuit of purity led only to corruption. Her devotion to the Jedi Code twisted into the chains that bound her to failure. Left alone with the whispers of the Sith, she was neither Jedi nor Sith, only a hollow echo of what she had once been. The road to the dark side had been paved with her best intentions, but in the end, it led her to nothing but silence.